debt beneath the floorboards. My grandmother used to say that some houses have memories pressed into the wood, like fossils in stone. Ours, she'd say, had a memory of the earth itself. I never understood what she meant, not until the night the cicadas went silent. I've been back in the village for 3 days. 3 days since I left my clean, air-conditioned apartment in Phnom Penh and drove the dusty, ochre-red roads to this place on the edge of the jungle. Yi Sathya was gone. The funeral was a blur of chanted prayers, the scent of melting candle wax, and the hollow ache of a house suddenly too large for its memories. I was here to pack up her life, to fold away the silk sampots she'd never wear again, and decide what to do with a lifetime of little treasures kept in biscuit tins. The house stands on thick wooden stilts, lifting it high above the mud and monsoon waters. During the day, it's a peaceful place. Sunlight filters through the gaps in the woven bamboo walls, painting shifting patterns on the polished teak floors. But at night, the jungle presses in. The darkness outside isn't just an absence of light. It's a living thing, thick with the scent of damp soil and unseen blossoms. That night, the air was heavy enough to drink, a humid cocktail of day-old jasmine offerings from Yi's altar and the ever-present smell of the packed earth below. The only sound was the incessant, high-pitched drone of the cicadas, a pulsing rhythm against the oppressive silence. It was a sound so constant you could forget it was there, the heartbeat of the Cambodian night. I was sitting on a floor mat, sifting through a stack of old, sepia-toned photographs, when a floorboard creaked in the corner. My head snapped up. The corner was empty except for grandmother's shrine. Her portrait, taken decades ago, showed a young woman with kind eyes and a strength in her jaw that I recognized from my own reflection. The photo was draped in a length of rough, yellowed silk, and a single stick of incense smoldered before it, its thin ribbon of smoke climbing lazily towards the thatched roof. The creak was probably just the old wood settling, I told myself. The house was 100 years old. It had earned the right to groan. I tried to focus on the photos, on the faded smiles of ancestors I'd never met, but a new kind of quiet had fallen. It took me a moment to place it. The cicadas, they had stopped. All of them at once, as if a switch had been flicked. The jungle was plunged into an unnerving, absolute silence. My own breathing sounded harsh and loud in the sudden vacuum of sound. The hair on my arm stood up, my skin tingling with a primal alarm I couldn't explain. And then a new sound rose from below the house. It was soft at first, a rhythmic, wet scraping. It was a sound that didn't belong to the night. It wasn't the scuttling of a lizard or the rooting of a wild pig. It was slow, deliberate. It sounded like fingernails, long and hard, dragging slowly through mud. Scrape, pause. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze, listening. The sound was moving. It was drawing ever closer to the base of the stilts directly beneath me. I held my breath, straining to hear over the blood roaring in my ears. Scrape, drag, scrape. It was right underneath me now. I could almost feel the vibration through the floorboards. I thought about the space beneath the house. A dark, damp cavern of packed earth, home to nothing but shadows and the stray chickens that roosted there during the day. I told myself it was just an animal, a big monitor lizard maybe. They had long claws, but would a lizard stop the entire jungle from making a sound? The scraping stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I sat there for what felt like an hour, my muscles locked, my eyes fixed on the floor as if I could see through the wood. Nothing. The silence stretched on, taut and fragile. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the drone of the cicadas started up again. A few tentative chirps at first, then a few more, until the full, pulsing chorus of the night returned, washing over the house. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, my body trembling with relief. My mind, desperate for logic, latched onto the simplest explanation. A stray dog, a wild animal, anything but what my gut was screaming at me. I tried to laugh it off, the city boy spooked by a little country quiet. But as I lay down to sleep that night, on a thin mattress on the floor, I couldn't shake the feeling of that heavy, listening silence. And I couldn't forget that sound. The sound of something patient and hungry, dragging itself through the mud below. The next morning, the sun burned away the lingering fear. The village was alive with the familiar sounds of roosters crowing and the distant putter of a fishing boat on the river. I convinced myself I had imagined the worst of it. Grief, I thought, plays tricks on the mind. I spent the day clearing out a large wooden wardrobe, the air filling with the scent of mothballs and old perfume. Around noon, Lok Yi Chan, our neighbor from across the dusty track, brought me a bowl of rice porridge, its steam fragrant with ginger and spring onions. She was a tiny woman, her skin a roadmap of wrinkles, her eyes holding the kind of deep-seeing wisdom that only comes from a long life lived close to the land. "You look tired, Vanna," she said, her voice raspy like dry leaves. She didn't call me Bang, the respectful term for an older brother as most would. She had known me since I was a boy. "Just a bad night's sleep, Lok Yi," I said, forcing a smile. "The house is making a lot of noise." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked around the room, her gaze lingering on Yi Sathia's portrait. "This house is old, older than me. It remembers more than we do. Your Yi, she knew how to listen to it." She placed a gnarled hand on my arm. Her skin was cool. "Be respectful of its sleep, child. Some things are best left undisturbed." Her words were meant to be comforting, I think, but they left a chill in the humid air. I thanked her for the porridge and watched as she shuffled back to her home. What did she mean? Respectful of its sleep. That afternoon, I decided to do some work outside, needing the fresh air. I was checking the wooden stilts for termites, running my hand along the thick, weathered timber when my fingers brushed against something coarse and gritty. I looked down. Clinging to the wood about a foot off the ground was a smear of dark, wet mud. I frowned. It hadn't rained in days, the ground was dry and cracked. I looked closer. Embedded in the mud, perfectly clear, were 5 long, deep gouges, like marks left by fingers that had scraped their way up from the ground. My blood ran cold. It was at the base of the very stilt directly under the spot where I'd been sitting last night. I quickly checked the other stilts. They were all clean, only this one was marked. I spent the rest of the day in a state of anxious dread. Every shadow seemed to lengthen unnaturally. Every creak of the house sounded like a footstep. I tried to keep myself busy, but my eyes kept drifting to the floorboards, imagining the dark, cramped space beneath. I thought about what Lok Yi Chan had said. Your Yi, she knew how to listen to it. What had my grandmother been listening for? Driven by a new, urgent curiosity, I began searching not just for things to pack, but for answers. In the bottom of her wardrobe, beneath a stack of old sarongs, I found a small, intricately carved lacquer box. It was locked. After a frantic search, I found a tiny, tarnished brass key hidden in the frame of her portrait. Inside the box, there was no jewelry or money, just a small bundle of dried herbs tied with a red string, a few oddly shaped river stones, and a thin, leather-bound journal. The journal was filled with Yi's elegant, looping Khmer script. The early entries were what you'd expect. Notes about the harvest, village gossip, remedies for coughs and fevers. But as I flipped towards the end, the writing became rushed, frantic. The graceful loops turned into jagged slashes. An entry from about a month ago stood out. The rains are late again. The ground is thirsty. It is growing impatient. I made the offering of jasmine and sweet rice, but I do not think it was enough. The scraping has started again, louder this time. It knows I am getting weak. My breath hitched. The scraping, she had heard it too. I read on, my hands trembling. It is the old debt, the Bikator, the guardian beneath the soil. Grandfather made a promise when the fever took the village long before I was born. A promise of tribute, of respect in exchange for the family's health. A life for the land, he called it, but not a life of blood, a life of service. We are the keepers of its slumber. If we fail, it will come to collect what it is owed. The last entry was from the week before she died. The handwriting was barely legible. "I am too old. My strength is gone. Last night it touched the floor. I felt the cold seep through the wood. I have failed, and now the debt falls to my children, to my Vanna. May the spirits forgive me. I have left the house unprotected." A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just a haunting. It was an inheritance, an ancient pact with something that lived in the earth beneath our home. A becator, a guardian, but a guardian of what? And what was the debt it had come to collect? That night, I didn't even pretend to try and sleep. I lit every kerosene lamp in the house, casting out the shadows until the small room was as bright as day. I sat with my back against the wall, the journal clutched in my hands, and I waited. The cicadas droned on. 10 o'clock, 11, midnight, nothing. A sliver of hope began to grow in my chest. Maybe she had been old, her mind clouded by illness. Maybe it was all just the fearful fantasy of a dying woman. Then, just like the night before, the cicadas went silent. The world outside my little circle of light held its breath. I didn't have to wait long. Scrape, drag, scrape. It was back, but this time it wasn't just below me. The sound was moving around the perimeter of the house. A slow, methodical patrol, scrape, drag from one corner to the other. It was searching, testing. Then came a new sound, a loud, solid thump against one of the stilts. The whole house vibrated. I choked back a cry. It was trying to get in. Thump, thump. It sounded like something heavy and dense being slammed against the wood. I imagined a body, caked in mud, flinging itself against the foundations of my home. I scrambled to the small window, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, and peered through a crack in the shutter. The moonlight was weak, casting long, distorted shadows. I couldn't see anything at first, just the familiar shapes of the banana trees and the dark, packed earth. Then a flicker of movement. From the deepest shadow under the house, something was emerging. It wasn't an animal. It was long and emaciated, its limbs moving with an unnatural fluidity. I couldn't make out a face, only a silhouette that seemed to drink the light around it. It unfolded itself, rising slowly, its form impossibly tall. It placed a long, spindly hand on the stilt. The hand was caked in black mud, and I could see the glint of what looked like long, dirty fingernails. It was looking up at the house, up at me. I fell back from the window, gasping, my mind refusing to process what I had seen. The becator, the guardian, it was real, and it was trying to get in. A new sound began, and this one was worse than all the others. It was a wet, sticky, dragging sound, and it was coming from right on the other side of the wall. It was on the veranda. It had climbed the stilts. My mind reeled. How? The veranda was 10 feet off the ground. Panic, cold, and absolute seized me. I was trapped. I looked wildly around the room, my eyes landing on the shrine, on Yi's portrait. Her painted eyes seemed to be filled with a terrible sorrow. I have left the house unprotected. What had she done to protect it? The journal didn't say. It only spoke of the debt, the offering, jasmine and sweet rice. I had put fresh flowers there that morning, but it was just a gesture of remembrance, not a ritual. A scratching sound started at the door, not a knock, a slow, deliberate scratch like a dog wanting to be let in. But this was no dog. The sound was too sharp, the wood of the door groaning under the pressure. Scratch, scratch, splinter. It was carving its way through. Desperate, I grabbed the bundle of dried herbs from the lacquer box. I didn't know what they were, but they were all I had. The scratching at the door grew more frantic. I could hear the wood splintering, thin shrieks of protest from the frame. I ran to the door and shoved the dried herbs into the gap between the door and the frame. I didn't know what else to do. It was a futile, desperate act. The moment the herbs touched the wood, the scratching stopped. A low hiss came from the other side of the door, a sound of rage and frustration. It was followed by a heavy, wet thud, as if the creature had thrown itself against the door one last time. And then, silence. I stood there for a long time, my body pressed against the door, listening. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. After what felt like an eternity, I heard a soft, slithering sound as something dragged itself off the veranda and back down to the earth below. A few minutes later, the cicadas started their song again. I didn't move from the door until the first rays of sunlight sliced through the shutters. I was exhausted, but sleep was impossible. The thing was gone for now, but I knew it would be back. The herbs had been a temporary reprieve, a stopgap. They hadn't satisfied it. The next day, I didn't bother with packing. I took the journal and went to see Lok Yi Chan. I found her sitting on her porch, weaving a basket from palm fronds. She looked up as I approached, and her knowing eyes told me she had already guessed I was coming. I didn't know where to start. I just held out the journal. Lok Yi, I read this. I saw it last night. She set her weaving aside and patted the wooden step next to her. Sit, Vanna. I told her everything. The scraping, the muddy handprint, the creature on the veranda, the herbs. She listened patiently, her expression unchanging, her gaze fixed on the jungle that bordered her property. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. Your great-grandfather was a proud man, but a desperate one, she finally said, her voice low. The Khmer Rouge years were behind us, but the land was sick, and so were the people. A fever swept through this village, taking children in the night. Your Yi Sathya, she was just a girl then, and she was wasting away. He went to the old grounds, the place where the ancient temple stones sleep, and he made a bargain. She pointed a crooked finger towards a dense, dark patch of jungle far behind my grandmother's house. There is something buried there, something old, something that was worshipped long before the Buddha's teachings came to this land. A spirit of the soil, a guardian. Your great-grandfather promised that his family, his bloodline, would be its new keepers. You would tend to its slumber, give it offerings, show it respect. In exchange, the guardian would protect the family from sickness and famine. It would let you borrow life from its land. The debt, I whispered, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Yes, she said, the debt. Your grandmother honored it her whole life. She knew the rituals, the specific flowers, the right phase of the moon for the rice offering, the words to be chanted. But her body grew weak. Her memory began to fail. She started making mistakes. The guardian grew restless. It is not evil, Vanna. It is territorial. It is like a landlord whose tenants have stopped paying rent. It has come to collect. Collect what? I asked, dreading the answer. It wants what was promised. A keeper, someone to perform the rituals to honor the pact. If it cannot have a willing keeper, it will take an unwilling one. It will drag them down into the earth, to serve it in the darkness. A cold sweat broke out on my skin. That was what it was trying to do. It was trying to take me. What do? I pleaded. I don't know the rituals, the chants. Lok Yi Chan looked at me, her eyes filled with a deep, weary pity. Your Yi knew you would come. She knew she was leaving you this burden. The herbs I gave her, the ones you used, they will anger it, but they will not stop it. They are a ward against common spirits, not a contract holder. You have two choices. You can run, flee back to Phnom Penh and never return. Perhaps it will be content with the house, the land, perhaps. The way she said perhaps told me it was a fool's hope. And the second choice. You become the keeper, she said softly. You accept the debt. You must go to it tonight, under the house. You must make an offering, not of jasmine, but of yourself. A promise. An offering of blood to show you are of the same line as the one who made the pact. You must let it know that a new keeper has taken over. The thought of going down there, into the dark, into the mud, with that thing was paralyzing. But the thought of it following me, of this curse hanging over my family forever, was worse. My grandmother had spent her life protecting us. I couldn't let her sacrifice be for nothing. Lok Yi Chan gave me instructions. Simple, terrifying instructions. I had to take a piece of my family's history, something old. I had to anoint it with my own blood. And I had to place it at the base of the central stilt, the heart of the house, and speak my intention, my acceptance of the debt. I had to do it when the cicadas fell silent. when it was listening. That evening, a storm rolled in from the mountains. The sky turned a bruised purple and the wind began to howl, rattling the tin roof. Rain came down in blinding sheets, turning the world outside into a churning, watery chaos. It felt like the world was ending, or maybe it was just beginning. I found what I was looking for in my grandfather's old army trunk, a krama, the traditional Cambodian scarf that he had worn his entire life. It was faded and soft from 1,000 washings, and it still smelled faintly of him. It was the oldest piece of my family I could hold in my hands. I sat in the middle of the room, the krama in my lap, a small knife in my hand, and I waited. The storm raged outside, a symphony of chaos that drowned out all other sounds. I couldn't hear the cicadas. I couldn't hear anything but the wind and the rain and the frantic beating of my own heart. How would I know when? As if in answer, a blinding fork of lightning lit up the entire sky, followed by a crack of thunder so loud it shook the house to its foundations. In the deafening silence that followed the thunderclap, I knew. The storm was loud, but the jungle was quiet. It was time. My hand trembled as I drew the knife across my palm. The cut was deeper than I intended, and blood, dark and shockingly red, welled up instantly. I squeezed my fist, letting the blood drip onto the faded fabric of the krama, staining it with my life, my promise. Taking a deep breath, I got up and walked to the trapdoor in the floor that led to the space beneath the house. My hand shook as I pulled it open. A wave of cool, damp air washed over me, carrying the rich, metallic scent of wet earth and something else, something foul, like river mud and decay. The darkness below was absolute. I switched on my flashlight, the beam cutting a nervous, trembling path through the gloom. The ground was a mess of churned mud and puddles from the rain, and everywhere I saw them, handprints, dozens of them caked on the stilts, some so high they nearly touched the floorboards. Long, clawed tracks were carved into the mud everywhere I looked. It had been down here, packing, waiting. My light beam landed on the central stilt. It was thicker than the others, the true anchor of the house. This was the place. I lowered myself down the ladder, my bare feet sinking into the cold, soft mud. The air was thick, suffocating. I felt a pressure all around me, a heavy, watching presence that made the skin on my neck crawl. I took a step towards the central stilt, the mud sucking at my ankles. The beam of my flashlight darted around nervously. Was it here? Was it watching me from the shadows? From the darkest corner of the space, a sound emerged. A low, wet gurgle. It was the sound of something trying to breathe through lungs full of mud. My flashlight beam snapped towards the sound, and I saw it. It was crouched in the corner, a tangled knot of limbs and shadow. It was pale, the color of a grub and slick with mud. Its arms and legs were unnaturally long, jointed like a spider's. It had no face that I could see, just a smooth, blank expanse of skin where features should have been. But I could feel its attention on me, an intense, crushing weight. It was the source of the pressure, the silence. It began to unfold itself, rising from its crouch, its long limbs scraping against the underside of the house. It was so tall its head brushed the floorboards above. Fear, pure and undiluted, threatened to swallow me whole. My legs refused to move. My throat was closed. I was going to die here. Then I looked down at the blood-soaked krama in my hand. I thought of my grandmother. I thought of her final, desperate journal entry. I have left the house unprotected. No, not anymore. With a surge of adrenaline, I lurched forward, stumbling through the mud towards the central stilt. The creature let out a horrifying, high-pitched shriek, a sound of fury and possession, and started to move towards me, its long limbs scuttling through the mud with terrifying speed. I reached the stilt, my back pressing against the rough wood. The creature was almost on top of me, its foul stench washing over me. I could see the long, claw-like fingernails on its pale hands. "I am Vanna," I yelled, my voice cracking with terror. "Son of Rith, grandson of Sathya, the dead is mine now, I accept it. I will be the keeper. I slammed the bloody krama against the base of the stilt, pressing it into the wood. The creature stopped, just inches from my face, its blank head tilted as if listening, considering. The pressure in the air intensified, squeezing my chest, making it impossible to breathe. It raised one of its long, spindly hands, the muddy claws extended, and slowly, deliberately, it reached for me. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. I felt a cold, wet touch on my cheek. It wasn't violent. It was almost curious. A long, muddy finger traced a line from my temple down to my jaw, leaving a cold, wet trail on my skin. It was examining me, judging me. And then it was over. The pressure vanished. The air rushed back into my lungs in a ragged gasp. I opened my eyes. The creature was gone. The space under the house was empty, except for me, the churning mud, and the blood-soaked krama pressed against the wood. The storm outside seemed to be lessening, the roar of the wind and rain softening to a distant rumble. I don't remember climbing back up into the house. I only remember collapsing on the floor, shaking and covered in mud, my heart slowly returning to a normal rhythm. I survived. The pact was renewed. I left the village the next morning. I didn't pack anything else. I locked the door to the house, leaving the krama where it was, a silent testament to the promise I had made. I didn't say goodbye to Lok Yi Chan. There was nothing left to say. I drove for hours, putting as much distance as I could between myself and that place. As the sun began to set, tinting the Phnom Penh skyline in shades of orange and pink, I thought I was safe. I thought I had left the horror behind me, trapped in the mud beneath that old house. But as I pulled into my modern, sterile parking garage, I happened to glance in my rearview mirror. And I saw it. On the dusty back window of my car, perfectly clear in the dim light, was a single, muddy handprint. Long, elegant fingers caked in the dark, rich soil of my grandmother's village. I had accepted the debt. I am the new keeper, but I was wrong about one thing. The guardian isn't tied to the house. It isn't tied to the land. It's tied to me. And now sometimes late at night when the city is quiet, I can hear it. A faint, rhythmic scraping just outside my 7th-story apartment window. It's patient. It's waiting. It's just reminding me that the rent is due. So I warn you, be careful of the promises your ancestors made. Be careful of the debts you inherit, because some guardians do not sleep forever, and when they wake up, they will always come to collect.